Hello, BookTube. I've been putting off and putting off doing that venerable BookTube tradition, the mid-year Bookish Freakout tag, which stems from so long ago that I don't think the originator is even still around on BookTube, if they ever were. Uh, but it's a regular thing that can be updated every year, where you take the midpoint of the year to take stock of what you've read, along a whole bunch of different categories. There are 14 or 15 prompts here that are designed to give you a kind of a handle on your reading so far this year. And I've been meaning to do it. And then I saw a whole rash of really cool, wonderful booktubers. I will try to remember to leave a long list of links down below so that you can see a whole bunch of people's reports on their year so far. And once I saw all that, I had all the push that I needed. It's extra complicated for me because I make, first of all, new releases are my remit. New releases are my self-imposed beat. They are what I cover. The new releases in the American market in the current year in the 15 or 16 genres that I read. I try to keep up with all of those, not just a smattering. I try to do an enormous amount of reading. I do nothing else, and I read very fast and for a large amount of time every day. When I'm not vacationing, that is, and when I'm feeling okay. My numbers are pretty good this year, but the reason why it's extra emphasized for me is because at the end of every year I do a year's best and worst book list on the Steve Reads portion of Open Letters Review. It's 10 books in a whole bunch of categories, and it is more exhaustive, more wide-ranging, more complete, and needless to say, more reliable than any other of the unbelievable number of year's best and worst book lists. It is the one to read and the one to keep. I've been doing it for a very long time. And so when I'm taking stock in mid-year, I'm thinking about that list at the end of the year and thinking about the shape that my reading is going to take for the rest of the year. As of this morning, in 2021, I have read 604 books. I plan on getting that number up enormously between now and the beginning of December. Enormously. So these questions, all of these questions are up for grabs. Almost all of them will almost certainly shift around in the course of the year. That's true every time I do a bookish freakout tag. Just wanted to say that for newcomers. That's all, for people who might not have watched any of my old mid-year bookish freakout tags. But I wanted to do this while it was still June. So we'll just leap right into the prompts, which are some of them are very basic and some of them are very hard for someone like me. Prompt number one is, what is the best book you've read so far in 2021? There are all kinds of books. I can't say just one book. For the purposes of this prompt, I will say one book that impressed the daylights out of me, and it's something that I've talked about on this channel before. It's an adult graphic novel. It's a non-superhero graphic novel by the New Yorker cartoonist Will McPhail. It's called In. It came out in June. I believe it was originally scheduled to come out in April or May, and then it was postponed until June. It's an oversized thing in full color, and it is amazing. Just amazing. Just incredibly, incredibly moving. Most of the millennial anomie, the millennial aimlessness, and the woes of not knowing who you are, or not caring enough to make your own preferences or whatnot. Most of the stuff, the personal struggles of the main character in the book, are completely alien to me, but I'm just unbelievably impressed by it. So I'm going to say In by Will McPhail. Then prompt number two is the best sequel you've read so far. So far, that would be The Bombay Prince by Sujata Massey, which is technically a sequel. It is the third book in an ongoing murder mystery series of hers taking place roughly 80 years ago in India. Her main character is one of the very first female lawyers in the country. And the Bombay Prince is the name of the book, and it takes place during a lot of the nationalist uprisings, the nationalist fervor being created by a new on the scene nationalist figure named Gandhi. But there is a murder mystery in it that is really well done. I just love the series. And when you love a series like this, you always worry that the next book in the series will let you down, will somehow prove that the first few books in the series were a fluke. I don't know why I worry about that. I haven't hit that very often. Usually these authors know what they want to do, and they know what they're about before they start. I no longer worry, for instance, that a Maggie Hope novel will be bad, or Gray Man novel. And the same thing here. This book removed any lingering doubt. So it's The Bombay Prince, which we saw on this channel. I strongly recommend recommend it request it from your library, or apply a coupon to get it at your local retail bookstore or whatever. But if you like murder mysteries, historical murder mysteries, slice of life, exotic locale murder mysteries, this is a series for you. If you've missed it somehow, this is the third book, so you can easily catch up. Then question number 3, prompt number 3 is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. And that's prompt number 3. Prompt number 4 is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And prompt number 13 is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And all 3 of those are basically the same question for me, because there's not a whole lot of rereading that's going to make it onto a list like this. I don't really think about, I do a lot of rereading in every year, but I don't really think about my rereading along these lines. I am too much focused on new releases. That is the kind of thing I read. We all read different kinds of things. That is the kind of thing I read. And this list is preparatory to a written list later in the year. So I'm not thinking about reprints unless it's a reprint edition. Unless it's a reprinted edition of some kind. The year, for instance, started off with a gorgeous, big, heavy, selected writings of Samuel Johnson, where I have read everything that's in it. So the question is going to be, what kind of an editorial edition is it? Same thing is true with an upcoming annotated Mrs. Dalloway, where I'm not counting those as new releases because the bulk of what's in them is not new. There is an exception on this list along those lines, which I will get to, but since those 3 questions are basically the same, I'm basically going to answer them all now instead of just marginally massaging them at different points in this tag. So I'm just going to list a bunch of books that I haven't read yet that are still coming out in 2021 that I very much want to read. And that'll cover question 3, question 4, and question 13. The first of those is Robert E. Lee, a big new biography of Robert E. Lee by Alan Guelzo, which at the time of this reading, I have not yet started. I plan on starting it today. Alan Guelzo wrote a book on the Battle of Gettysburg that I really, really liked. And he has an infinite amount of credit at the bank. And we'll see how much of it he exhausts in writing what I think is going to be a fair and balanced biography of someone who doesn't deserve one. As I've said many times on this channel, in fact, I was saying it for decades before there was any kind of controversy about statues in public parks, Robert E. Lee should have been hanged from the highest branch of the tallest tree at Appomattox Courthouse. As soon as he signed the Articles of Capitulation to make his army surrender, he should have been executed, out of hand. No trial, no court-martial, no nothing like that. He led armies, he didn't just speak against the United States government, that he was sworn to defend, not only civilly, but militarily. He swore an oath at West Point. But he didn't just speak against that government. He led armies against it. He caused thousands and thousands of deaths of people trying to defend that union, and all for the cause of slavery. He deserved to be executed out of hand, him and Jefferson Davis with him. There is no way to write a sympathetic biography of this creature, and yet things hardly had a biographer that didn't try to do it. Alan Guelzo, I think, is going to try to do it, but I will let you know. Then the next one is The Last King of America. This is a new biography of King George III, and I've read every biography of King George III, and most of them put a weird amount of emphasis on America. The king who lost the colonies, America's last king, that sort of thing. There was a lot more to King George's reign than I shouldn't say just. He did lose his colonies in North America, and that's a big deal. There was a lot more to his reign than either that or his later quote-unquote madness, his medical madness. And so I might not put this high on my priority because a lot of times these books regurgitate things, except for the author. The author is Andrew Roberts, who did a book called Napoleon the Great, who's done a whole bunch of books, all of them great. He's just a fantastically readable writer. So I'll read it. I'll read it, absolutely. Robert E. Lee and King George III. And there's also Volker Urich's, the English-language translation of Volker Urich's Hitler, the second volume in his Hitler biography. A whole bunch of noxious people getting biographies. I'm going to read them all. Then the next one is Innovation. And this is the 6th and last volume in Peter Ackroyd's big multi-volume history of England. And this starts with, I think, the Victorian era, the Boer Wars, and goes all the way to the present day. So it is basically his history of 20th century England. And I've read every other volume in the series. I really, really enjoy the series. Of course, when you write a series like this, you have to pick and choose. This is a very popular multi-volume history of England, probably the last one that will ever be written. And so some of the volumes, like for instance on the Tudor era seemed to me a little bit on the shallow side, or a little bit on the weird side, where you're just picking a little subject to talk about. That's unavoidable, though, so I'm all for it. Then the next one, also a book so Andrew Roberts, Alan Guelzo, Peter Ackroyd. This next one is also a book that I'm reading largely because the author has never let me down. The author is Bob Spitz, and this is the new book that's coming out by him is a biography of the rock band Led Zeppelin. Lots and lots of great stories to tell there, and I'm not sure if he's allowed legally to tell some of them, but we shall see. I would read it anyway. I'd read anything that he did, even if he wrote a book about Morrissey, I would still read it. Sinead O'Connor. If he writes about something in the pop culture or pop music world, I will read it. And the next one also is actually an author that has never let me down. We'll see what this one is like. It's Our First Civil War by H.W. Brands. New book coming out in the fall that draws attention to the fact that Maya Jasanoff has drawn attention to, and others in the past have done, which is that it is very wrong to say that 100% of Americans in those North American colonies wanted to break from England. That is very much wrong to say. A huge majority of them did not want to do that. They were the so-called loyalists. They wanted to stay loyal to the crown, no matter how badly the crown was treating them. And it's a complicated subject, and a spiky one, because the American mythology says that Americans had had enough of British tyranny, and that Americans dumped British tea into Boston Harbor, when most Americans at the time deplored such things, and did not want to break from the mother country, and they didn't want war to erupt on their soil either, as you never do. If you have a farm in the middle of nowhere, if troops come down that road, you're ruined, no matter whose side you're on. H.W. Brands is a really good historian, so I'm all up for what he has to say. Then a romance novel. There's a romance novel by Lenora Bell, who I didn't really know that well. She's not a romance author that I've read much about. Her new book coming out is called The Devil's Own Duke, and it's the sequel to a Regency romance of hers called Love is a Rogue that I think was my introduction to this author, and I really liked it. So I'm really looking forward to the sequel. Then the next one is Making Darkness Light by Joe Moshenska. And this is another biography of John Milton. We saw last year, I believe it was, there was The Poet of Revolution, a book about Milton's radical politics, about the political side of his life. I thought that book was really good, but a little bit lopsided, and I mean to go back to it, and I will go back to it now because I will read it in preparation for Making Darkness Light. And we'll see what this biography of Milton has to say. I don't have any higher an opinion of Milton than I do of King George III or Robert E. Lee, but you don't have to like the subject of a biography to read a new book. Then the next one is don't have to like the author. I myself don't hate this author as much as it seems like the whole world does, but nevertheless, the author is Richard Dawkins. And he has a book coming out called Books Do Furnish a Life, which collects all of the reviews, the prefaces, the forwards that he has written over, 40 years? Ever since The Selfish Gene made him famous, he's been tapped to do these sorts of things, sometimes at fairly significant length. I know that I have not seen all of these things. He's written pieces for the New York Review of Books. Famously, there was a debate. He's written things for the London Review of Books, the TLS, and also you come out with a new edition of, I don't even know, Charles Lyell. You might get him to write the introduction, and he puts work into them. This is a pretty thing, and it's going to be the collected works right along my lines of this guy, so I'll definitely read it. The next one is The King's Painter by Franny Moyle. This is the latest biography of Hans Holbein, whose name you might not know, and you might not know any details of his life, but you have certainly seen his artwork, which not every famous artist can say. You have certainly seen his artwork. He was invaluable in showing us with camera-like detail what the people of the Tudor era looked like. You only have to think about what your imaginative world would be like if those pictures didn't exist, if no one had done those pictures, much less somebody as talented as Holbein. How much poorer would your feeling of the Tudor era, of King Henry VIII, of Thomas Cromwell, of St. Thomas More, how much poorer would your conceptions of all of that be if you didn't have these paintings to go and see? Holbein didn't lead a very interesting life. He was mostly just hustling for money in order to send a large amount of it home to his family. But nevertheless, we'll see what Franny Moyle can do. Then the next one is The Nutmeg's Curse by Amitav Ghosh. And this is another example of a book where I'm looking forward to it because the author has never let me down. And this is a story, ultimately, big picture, it sounds like it will be a story about climate change, about how the world is changing underneath our feet. But it goes way back in history. It goes back to the nutmeg trade and to, it goes back centuries. So I'm not quite sure what angles he'll take, but I'm totally for it, totally on board. Then the next one is by Garrett Graff. The name rings a bell with me, but I haven't actually looked to see if this person has written anything that I already know. But Garrett Graff has written a new book called, or is coming out with a new book called Watergate: A New History. A fairly long thing, I think, from Basic Books or Pegasus Books or something like that. I'm not going to miss it, obviously. It's a big, one-volume, general interest, comprehensive overview history of an event, an era, a national crisis that I, for decades, said was the low point of the American experiment, the low point of American communality. That things couldn't get any worse than this unless we were invaded by a foreign power. For decades, I said that. And then Donald Trump happened. For decades, I said, well, there were bad, corrupt presidents in American history, and then there's a wide gap, and then there's Richard Nixon. And there's no contest between him and anybody else. And I thought that would just stay true until I rolled over in the dirt. And it isn't. It isn't. It stopped being true. Now there are a whole bunch of bad presidents, then a wide gap, then Richard Nixon, and then a very wide gap, and then Donald Trump, who incited an armed insurrection to overthrow the government because he didn't like the results of an election. He was willing to overthrow the United States government and install himself as an unelected dictator for life. And he's still free. He's still alive. I don't understand any of that, but nothing, not one element of that would have even crossed Richard Nixon's mind. Not one element would have. Richard Nixon was an odious individual, but he was still an American. Whereas Donald Trump is... Anyway, Watergate this will be the first full-length sort of soup-to-nuts history of Watergate that I have read since the January 6th insurrection to overthrow the United States government, execute the sitting vice president, and install the sitting president as an unelected dictator. This will be the first history of what I previously thought was the lowest point in American communality. So we'll see how. I'm sure the resonances will be different. Then the next one is Albert Camus and the Human Crisis by Robert Meagher. Camus is an author who's never really fascinated me all that much, nor have I ever really thought that anything that he wrote was all that brilliant, although I've been surrounded my whole life by people who thought otherwise. Maybe it's time for a reevaluation. Maybe in the preparation for this book, which is a kind of a long biographical treatment, maybe in preparation for this, I should snap up every Camus book that I find at the Brattle between now and then. I probably will do that since they'll be $1. But I have a feeling this book is going to get very widely reviewed, and I might like to be part of that conversation. If I want to be part of that conversation come the fall, I'm going to need to know and read up on a lot more of Camus than I have at present, so we shall see. I don't think at the moment I own a single biography. Then the next one is The White Ship, which is about a very noticeable tragic incident in British history. King Henry I had his arrogant son and the cream of the nobility of his realm. They were all packed on board a ship. They all got drunk and rowdy. The ship hit a rock, and almost everybody died. There was, I think, one survivor of the White Ship. And we're told that after that, the king never smiled again because his heir and most of his strongest nobles had drowned, drunkenly drowned. And there's a new history, a new study of the White Ship. It won't just be that one. That one incident took 20 minutes. So this will be about the reign. It'll be about, it'll be the whole surrounding context. And it's by Charles Spencer, Viscount Lord Spencer, who's written a couple of books now, and is very, very interesting to talk to. I'm really kind of hoping in the back of my mind that maybe I can do a Zoom chat with him about this book. That would be a lot of fun. I bet you would find him very interesting to listen to about history. Most of you, especially if you don't read history, will mainly know him for the fiery speech he gave in posthumous defense of his sister, Princess Diana. he's one of those Spencers. but he's also a very good popular historian, so I can't wait for the book. Then the next one is Kaibyo. Kaibyo, Kaibyo. Again, I'm going at this. I realize now that most of these books I'm picking because I know the author, I know their work, or I know them personally, and I want to read the next thing they do, no matter what it is. That is certainly true in this case. This is by Zach Davison, who's an author I've mentioned on this channel before. He did a volume years and years ago. I cannot recommend it strongly enough, called Yurei, Yurei, about a particular kind of ghost, a particular kind of summer ghost in Japan. They rise up out of wells. They have a very particular appearance, and they can be terrifying in some great Japanese literature, a lot of which has never been translated into English, recounting all kinds of spine-chilling Yurei ghost stories. Didn't at all think I would be interested in the book. I read it. I read Zach Davison's book, Yurei, and loved it. I reviewed it. If I remember, I will leave my link to the review down below. And he has a new book. His new book is called Kaibyo, and it's about the demon cats of Japan. He's once again examining the mytho-folklore of Japan, only this time, instead of a particular kind of scraggly, drowned-looking ghost, he's looking at demon cats. I don't know why I do this to myself, but I do know why in this case. I love this author, so I will definitely get this book and read it, and hopefully review it as well. The next one, also an author. It's Claire Tomalin. A lot of you know Claire Tomalin, a fantastic, fantastic biographer. Her new book is a biography of H.G. Wells, who hasn't had a big popular biography in quite some time, considering that almost all of his major fictional creations are things that have entered into the common parlance, like Sherlock Holmes. The Invisible Man, we all know that concept, even if you haven't read the book. Even so, popular biographers tend to neglect him, or at least on this side of the ocean they do. And it's an uphill battle, because yes, he wrote First Man in the Moon, and he wrote The Time Machine, and he wrote War of the Worlds, and he wrote The Invisible Man, but he also wrote a lot of other things that no one's ever read. No, since his own day, no one has ever read. And if you're a conscientious biographer, you have to cover those years and those events, those writings, and that's where you lose a lot of your audience. So we shall see. I'm very interested. I will certainly read it. I love H.G. Wells. Then this next one is by Matthew Sturgis. Again, the name rings a bell. I'm pretty sure I've not only read but reviewed this author in the past. And his new book is a big biography of Oscar Wilde. And like a lot of people, I think that sort of the book was written and finished on Oscar Wilde with Ellmann's biography, which is a masterpiece of the biographical art. And that's the wrong way to think, right? That is the wrong way to think. I've read many biographies of Hans Holbein. I've read many biographies of Robert E. Lee. It isn't a zero-sum game. It isn't a question of how someone will write the perfect biography and then no one will ever be able to do it again. Not at all. Biographers bring different sensibilities to the table. And a lot of time has passed since Ellmann's biography, and there have been, as far as I know, no great big doorstop, one-volume, sort of beginning to cradle to grave biographies of Oscar Wilde since then. So I have a feeling this is going to get very widely reviewed, and I might want to be part of that conversation. Wilde's writing doesn't really do it for me, never really has. Much the same thing as Camus. I know that he's beloved, I know that he's revered, but he's never really done it for me. But maybe it's time to dust off that Ellmann. I wonder if I even have the Richard Ellmann biography. To dust it off, reread it, and maybe reread some Wilde. Could very well be. It's what I love about new releases, that they can shape my reading in ways that I don't predict and don't want to predict. What else have we got here? Oh, Powers and Thrones by Dan Jones, the historian Dan Jones. This is a new history of the Middle Ages. Very ambitious project. I don't think it's a very long book either. I think it's well short of 1,000 pages. Always up for it. Again, this is an author whose work I mostly like. The next one is a pop culture biography, but it is a far cry from Led Zeppelin, even though I bet the sales numbers are the same or embarrassingly in favor of this new group. There's a book coming out called Blood, and it is a collective autobiographical memoir of the Jonas Brothers, who shot to fame as an adorable moppet-haired boy band group who were most notable in the press for their purity rings, for being good, clean boys that your parents didn't need to worry if they were your favorite boy band. To put it mildly, that has changed enormously in the meantime. The Jonas Brothers have grown up, and that has mainly taken the form of tobacco use. They're all roasting tobacco addicts. Although there is currently on the planet virtually no tobacco addict as bad as the young Jonas brother, Nick Jonas, who smokes 20 to 30 long, thick cigars every day. 20 to 30 every day. He is, unless he is in a photo shoot or in a video where it's contractually obligated that he cannot be smoking, he is all the time smoking. And not little ragweed either, stuff that will really kill you. He almost certainly has first stage lung cancer. Almost certainly does, because he's been doing this for years and encouraging it for years. He's the last person in the 21st century who thinks that this is just a cool thing to do and it doesn't have any health problems, when he knows perfectly well that it does. When he climbs the 6-stair flight to go from one deck to another of one of the 10 yachts that he owns, by the time he gets up those 6 stairs on a beautiful summer day in Antigua, he can barely breathe. So he knows perfectly well from firsthand experience that he is dying. But he's not the only one. Good Lord, all the Jonas Brothers, they are not pure by any means. They never were. That was always a studio gimmick. But now it's out in the open. There are millions and millions of photos of them being crap heels to their fans, of them being just the typical kind of naga-hide, totally cynical Hollywood creation monsters. And in addition to that, all the other Jonas Brothers, there are 2 that were in the band. There's another one who was never in any kind of band, but who's nevertheless been very assiduously taught to be a tobacco addict by Nick Jonas. Nick Jonas addicted his youngest brother and made sure to increase his addiction. You want to come golfing with me? Well, you know what you have to do, and it's not be good company. I have a requirement of drug taking for you to come golfing with me. You want to go yachting with me? I have a requirement. You have to take this drug. More of it than you did the last time, or I'm going to call you a punk, a baby. Very high sin weight to lay on the shoulders of a young man, that I have made a lifelong, ruinously unhealthy addict out of someone who wouldn't have been without me. That's a heavy load to bear. Nick Jonas, I'm sure, doesn't care. I'm sure that he never spares a thought for any of this sort of thing. But in addition to that kind of evil, he's also become a raving egomaniac. He always was kind of the egomaniac Jonas brother, and that has become even worse. When you see at least the mock-up cover of this book, you'll see what I mean. It's him with a couple of tiny faces in the background that are everybody else, his 2 other brothers. But one way or another, it'll be a hate read, but I don't think it's going to get reviewed anywhere except in Entertainment Weekly, and maybe Rolling Stone will rip it to shreds. But I will certainly read it. I will certainly read it. Then the next one is Burning Boy. Bit of a curiosity on the list here. This is a biography of Stephen Crane. He's had a number of really good biographies and a number of really bad ones. I reviewed a really bad one. If I remember, I'll leave a link. I'll find my review and leave a link. But this is by Paul Auster, the novelist, Paul Auster. And that makes it interesting right there. That's always interesting when an author sort of crosses the line like that and tries something that's not in their usual wheelhouse. That would make it necessary to read anyway. I have a feeling that because it's Paul Auster, this will get reviewed everywhere as well, even by the normal, usual suspect stable of writers in New York City who don't care about Stephen Crane at all. We'll see. We'll see what it's like. It might be good. Then this next one is a book we've seen on this channel before, Wildland by Evan Osnos. We got the advance copy. It's a big book coming out, I think it's September, about some of the author's on-the-ground analysis of American rage, American political and tribal factional rage, where it comes from, how it's expressed by the people that he talks to. I've read many, many books along those lines. We'll see what this one is like. And then the last one, I promise, I could do this list all day, but this is already a long video. So the last one is the new volume in the Landmark series. Some of you will know the Landmark Herodotus, the Landmark Thucydides, the Landmark Julius Caesar, which is incredibly good. Really a 1-volume stopping place for everything Julius Caesar. And the next one in the series, coming out later this year, is the Landmark Xenophon's Anabasis. The story of one of the greatest adventure stories in ancient literature. The story of 10,000 Greek soldiers trapped behind enemy lines trying to fight their way back to their homeland. As a climactic moment where they spot the sea. It has tons and tons of great dramatic set pieces. It's a wonderful work. The only thing I think that Xenophon wrote that is truly great and that can be enjoyed by anybody, which is very rare for works in the ancient world. But this is the new Landmark Xenophon's Anabasis is translated by David Thomas. It's a new translation. It will have tons of maps all throughout. It will have great ancillary material, essays and appendices in the back, a long introduction. Can't wait. Just can't wait. These are great productions anyway. But this is a book that, oh my, I don't want to have it in any other form. So I'm happy to see that. So there you go. That is a very long answer to questions 3, 4, and 13, all of which deal with forthcoming books that you're interested in. I'm going to get all of these books. You'll probably see them come in the mail here. I'm going to read them all and plenty more beside. I have hardly talked about science, nature, most history, fiction, mystery, most romance, science fiction, fantasy. I haven't mentioned them at all. Lots and lots of books. I plan on reading a lot more books in this year. But we're going to move on here because we're only at prompt 4. We'll skip prompt 4 because that's all about anticipated releases. So the next one is prompt 5. The biggest disappointment. So far, this is Hate Inc. Hate, Incorporated by Rolling Stone writer Matt Taibbi, who's an author I usually really like. But in this book, he's saying it's all about how cable news has made us all hate the news. It's all made us distrust facts. It's made us hate each other. It's increased the tribalism that is going to end the American experience in our lifetimes. And it's the fundamental basis of it is wrong. There is no equivalence here between zealous but fact-bound reporting on places like NBC or MSNBC or whatever, and what happens in the neo-Nazi echo chamber with places like Fox or OAN. There is no comparison. Places like Fox and OAN are saying, they're looking straight into the camera and saying things they documented factually know aren't true. And just hoping they don't get sued for billions of dollars. There's nothing like an equivalence. And I don't like it that the book tries to paint that. Because I've been watching, and I'm as good an analyzer of these things as Matt Taibbi is. With a few more years under my belt, I guarantee you he doesn't remember Watergate. I know the difference between the things that I'm seeing here. I don't like false equivalences. So that was a disappointment. I was prepared to like that book. Then number 6 is the biggest surprise. For me, this would be Karen Tumulty's book, The Triumph of Nancy Reagan. A big biography of Ronald Reagan's wife, who's had a few books written about her, including damningly one by Kitty Kelly, and has been largely seen as a brittle, thin, shallow, and somewhat evil figure on the periphery of the Reagan world. Not as a three-dimensional human being. Certainly not as someone that anyone could love. And I knew that was going to be the angle of this book, and I thought, okay, well, if that's your angle, you're going to lie a lot. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Didn't see anything else. The first serious biography of this person that's ever been written, and an amazing reading experience. So a very big surprise there. The next one, 7, is your favorite new author. For me, this is a debut author. This will change. I'm going to read dozens and dozens of debut authors between now and the first week of December. But for me, it will be David Stewart McLean, who wrote a book called How I Learned to Hate in Ohio. Has a lot of YA elements to it. It's about a kid who just wants to be left alone, a high school kid who just wants to be left alone, and a charismatic foreigner, Sikh, enters his community, and they form a friendship, and it upends the main character's world and worldview. A lot of the book was the template of the book was fairly predictable, but I really liked how it was written. Really liked how it was done. That could change very much. That could change. The autumn is the season for high-profile debut releases, so we will see. But for right now, How I Learned to Hate in Ohio by David Stewart McLean. Number 8 is Newest Fictional Crush. I'm sticking with Nick Jonas. Number 9 is Newest Favorite Character. For me, this would be Chris McLaughlin. She is the main character of a book called Mississippi Barking. Not Mississippi Burning, but Mississippi Barking, that is coming out later this year, about the huge coordinated efforts to save the many thousands of pets that were left stranded and desperate after Hurricane Katrina. They're humans, either left or were evacuated. The pets were left on their own, thousands of them, with no more ability to go out into the street and find food than you would have, and much less to deal with floodwaters, downed electrical cords, all that sort of thing, being trapped in houses. Chris McLaughlin this is not an ego trip of a book, but she was infinitely my favorite character by the time I was done. So I'm going to stick with that, and I recommend the book. Number 10 is a book that made you cry. I don't cry usually when I'm reading books, but one that sort of worked me up emotionally was What is a Dog by Chloe Shaw, a memoir that we have seen the finished copy of on this channel. Just her looking back on the dogs in her life. Again, a very predictable template, but oh my, was it effective. And the only way that such books ever happen is because most of the dogs in your life are dead. Dogs age very fast. In 14 or 15 years, they're gone. If you're lucky, you get a little more time. But 14 or 15 years, they're gone. And that might not seem like a long time. It's certainly a long time if you're sitting and staring at a wall, but humans live a lot longer than that. And we love our dogs with abandon, and that the book was a gut punch. It is a necessary book. If you are a dog person, you got to get a copy of it. I would say for the doggish book people, the bookish dog people listening to me, there really are two necessary books so far in 2021. What is a Dog by Chloe Shaw, and Books Promiscuously Read by Heather White, which is about reading. Those two books, neither one of them is very long. They're both hardcovers. I don't usually urge you to get a hardcover, but in this case, they're going to love both of them. You really should put them both on your list. But that came the closest to making me cry. Then prompt number 11 is a book that made you happy. For this, I'm going to go to a kid's book, an instructional kid's book, but still a delightful one called There's a Zoo in My Poo. It was written by Rob Craw, and it was drawn by Felice Jacka. And it starts by dissecting the biome, the whole realm of microscopic animals that are in your poo, and by extension, in your digestive system, all with an aim towards making this stuff wonderful to kids. Making it not, kids love gross stuff anyway, but the book wants to take advantage of that in order to teach them stuff about all the biomes and microbiomes that live inside your body, that you are an ecosystem. It not only does it have what will almost certainly be the best title of the year, but it was also a tremendously good book. Something that would spark a lot of really interesting conversations between you and your little ones if you read it together, like the best kids books do. So then number 12 is the most beautiful book you bought this far this year or received. And for me, I have a prop. It was a gift from one of you. It's this beautiful thing, the illustrated Silmarillion, with the ribbon and the illustrations by Ted Naismith. This is just gorgeous stuff all throughout here. Let me see if I can quickly find an illustration. Yes, this is one I've shown you before. Some of you, those of you who've read the Silmarillion will know a giant dog can only be one character in this whole book. Can we get maybe another one? You've got maps for end papers there in color with all the forest. But is there a later picture that I can show you? I don't want to show you just a picture that I've already shown you. This is probably not cheap. This book is, oh, here we go, The White Tree. Those of you who've read your Lord of the Rings will know of the White Tree at the end of the story, but it has its forebearings, it has its grounding in this book. Do I dare see what the price of this thing is? Oh, okay, this doesn't have an American price. So one of you must have got this for me in the UK. But this is the prettiest thing that I've got so far. And of course, it gives me the opportunity to mention that myself and Scott Danielson and David Wiley are doing a read-along of the Silmarillion in July. So you can haul down your own Silmarillion and read along with us. We're breaking it up into 4 relatively equal parts in the month of July for Summer of the Silmarils. But anyway, that's the prettiest thing so far. We'll see how the rest of the year goes. Again, the autumn is the time for really gorgeous books that I would get just from publishers. So we'll see if anything beats it. I don't know that anything will. Then prompt number 13 is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? We've gone over this before. I gave you a long list. And then prompt number 14 is best book-to-movie adaptation. I watched a screener. I'm not sure if the movie is out yet. I'm not sure if it's distributed yet or where it's going to be distributed. I'm not sure how many movie theaters are open. Are your movie theaters open? If you're in America, are your movie theaters open where you are? Or if you're not in America, are your movie theaters letting people come back in despite COVID? One way or another, I got an electronic screener, an advanced copy for the adaptation of A.J. Finn's novel, The Woman in the Window. A.J. Finn was made infamous by a long New Yorker article that made him seem like the biggest cad and heel and liar in the world. But I don't think that I was alone in finishing that article and thinking, okay, well, I wouldn't want to be AJ Finn. I wouldn't want to know him, but I can't be the only person who finishes this article and desperately now wants to read the book. The Woman in the Window is the novel that it was at the center of this, an extended character profile of a guy you don't want to stay even a minute with. The book is serviceable. It's a thriller about a woman who has agoraphobia. She doesn't want to. It's basically a kind of a modern day update of Rear Window, but Amy Adams plays the main character in the movie. There are a couple of others. There are a couple of scenery sealers. Gary Oldman is in it. He tries his best. Amy Adams gives an amazing performance in the movie version of Girl in the Window, despite the fact that it's a very simple thing she's being asked to do. She does a really good job. There would definitely be that for best book to movie adaptation. Of course, the book to movie adaptation question hanging over the whole of 2021, and something I haven't seen yet, so I can't report on it, is Dune. Dune. There is a new movie adaptation of at least the first half of Dune, Frank Herbert's Dune. That will be, when it comes to when the book is closed on 21st century, on 2021 book to movie adaptations, that'll be the only thing that anybody talks about. And will they sing its praises, or will they condemn it? I don't know. I'll have to see it to find out. The trailer did not fill me with optimism, but maybe the movie will be significantly better. Who knew? Who knows? I will let you know. But anyway, there you go. God help us. That's long enough. That was my version of the 2021's mid-year Bookish Freakout tag. Sorry for the length of the video, but if any video is going to do it with me, it's going to be this. It's going to be something that asks me. I take this very seriously. My year-end list, the year-end reading that I do, I carefully watch what I'm doing. And I make a point of reading a lot. It's my goal by the end of the year to have read more of American new release books in 15 to 16 genres than whole newspaper book sections do together. That's my goal, is to read not only by the end of the year as much contemporary fiction as their contemporary fiction reviewer, but also more history than their history reviewers, more nature than their nature reviewers, more mystery writers than their mystery reviewers. In all the genres that I follow, I don't read economics, I don't read business, so but in the genres that I follow is a nice long list, and my goal is to cover them. You can't read them all, of course, but my goal is to do a representative job, so that when the year is over, every year is over. I do this every year. I've done it for a long time now. When the year is over, I want to feel that I did that ending year well enough, that I did it about as well as anybody has, and that I will always play catch up in the coming year, but that I'm ready to move on to the next year because I read the books in that year. So no, that's never true, never even close to true, but it's how I console myself. So that is the mid-year Bookish Freakout tag. If I remember, I will leave links and book titles and all down below, but probably won't remember. We shall see. We shall see. I am in the midst of a techpocalypse, so I have no idea if this video is going to work at all. That's what's going to be distracting me. But if it does, I will try to load it with information. And if I forget to do that, if I fail to do that, my email is on every video. Feel free to email me with follow-up questions about anything. So not just this video, but anything. In the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up. We're going to try and go a day this week, someday this week. It's not going to happen now, where we don't have a video that's over 40 minutes long. We're going to try that. Maybe tomorrow. I will try for one 10-minute video. Just long enough for you to make monetization. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.